You know what the most frustrating thing to me is about healthcare and food here in the US? That it's not healthy. Okay, that these companies keep using pesticides and everything to be able to have as much food production as possible. And a lot of that food goes to waste, anyways. So not only are they making us sick, then they're making us pay for the illnesses. On top of which, the medications that are given to us many times unneeded because they don't dig deeper into what's actually happening into our body. Those medications are directly funded by the same people who fund these corporations damaging our food sources and not recognizing that soil health is a detrimental cause of malnutrition here in the United States. Because no matter how much of the food that you're eating you eat, it doesn't have the nutrients it's supposed to have. So you still need supplements. Those supplements are not as easily digestible by some individuals as it would be to get the nutrients directly from the source, which would be the fruits and vegetables that we are eating, meats, healthier meats, and so on and so forth. All of this is intentional. It's intentional to keep us sick. And then they complain about the load of the medical debt, the national medical debt, and the national disability rate or unemployment rate, and so on and so forth. However, a lot of those farm workers get extremely ill and they don't even have insurance. They don't even have insurance to be cared for. And in many cases, they get fucked over in many other ways, not just that, because they don't get fair pay. So now you have Amazon, who is offering apparently a $9 health insurance. I don't know if it's actually real, so you're going to have to check into it because I couldn't find very much information on it. But supposedly that's the rumor, that Amazon is offering a $9 insurance for its Prime members. But you can't pay your employees livable wages so that they can pay the ridiculous insurance costs. I feel like this is a way to get people to start liking Amazon again. Not necessarily because you care about the people who are your consumers or your employees. And that goes for all of these corporations. This includes the farming corporations, a lot of them complaining about going out of business. However, not only do you not pay fair wages, you don't even offer insurance in many cases for these migrant workers who bust their ass and are touching chemically poisoned food. Because essentially, whether you wash it or not, a lot of those pesticides get absorbed by the nutrients. And there's a million ways to get rid of pests without having to use pesticides. There's a lot of farming techniques that can be done for large scale farming that do not require pesticides. That is a choice to use pesticides. And it's not even because it's cost effective, because it's not cost effective. On the contrary, using these forms of farming is actually less cost effective, because every season you got to be changing the crop and so on and so forth, without ever focusing on replenishing the soils where we're getting our food. So all of that food, it's like, yeah, you've got a vegetable, but it's just water. You're literally just eating water just so that your tummy feels full, not because it is getting the nutrients. It doesn't surprise me that more and more people are having gut issues. It doesn't surprise me that more and more people are having malnutrition issues or low minerals in their body and so on and so forth being depleted. It does not surprise me that some people need to drink a lot more water to be able to survive, because their body is trying to detox itself from all that shit. Not just from what's in our air, but what we're putting in our mouth, whether you're trying to have an extremely healthy diet or not. And it really frustrates me that these companies are universal health care could solve a lot of those situations, because of the fact that it would force these companies to stop making people sick, because they would have to pay into that. Forcing these companies to actually offer their employees a livable wage is difficult for them, because then they're not making as much money. Forcing these people to have optional healthcare options that do not require chemical intervention, such as medications that are harmful, and instead offer holistic intervention, is costly to big pharma. And nobody wants to take on big pharma because everybody's afraid of big pharma. But you do understand that there's more of us than there is of them. And for every person that is benefited by medications, there's at least 100 that were harmed by them. And that's not an acceptable harm. Even one person being harmed by the medication should not be an acceptable harm. And I get that people are getting upset that a lot of these preventable diseases are on the rise again because of vaccinations and so on and so forth. But again, big pharma caused that mistrust. It wasn't the mistrust of the people. It's the mistrust that big pharma breeded with their COVID vaccines. So don't try to pretend like you're not harming people and like you're not liable for that harm. Every single illness that you guys are causing is directly correlated to our food sources and our employment sources. If you're always in survival, your body's going to break down eventually. If you're having to work 3 or 4 jobs just to pay the rent and keep food on the table, you are going to get sick. I don't know any person that does not get sick. I know thousands of people that pretend they're not sick and are delulu telling themselves they're not sick so that they don't feel sick. But no matter how much you mask your illnesses or or use the placebo effect on yourself, because I've done it too, there's only so far that your body can keep pushing before it breaks down. And I've never met a person who does not break down in the end from being put in that much pressure. On top of it, you have millions of immigrants that have been paying into those systems and never benefited by those systems. You have millions of Americans who invested all of their money into this country only for them to get it taken away and deported, even if they have their papers. How the fuck does that even make sense? How does that even make sense? It's the same thing that farmers sometimes do. They get the crop picked and everything like that, and then they call immigration on their own employees sometimes when they don't want to pay. Because these racist tactics have existed for a long time. And if anybody speaks up on it, then you become the fucking target. Then your family becomes a target. Y'all want to talk about the criminals in other countries, but what about these criminals? What about those criminals? It doesn't make sense to me. And then you're sitting there asking multiple countries to invest in our country right now that things are going to shit. And then you fuck them over like they did with the plant, the Koreans in that plant. You want them to train the American people and then be tortured and sent back to their country? Even when they're here legally? Just because you want a white nation? Maybe it's because I've never had the privilege of having white skin and I don't know what it feels like to be that privileged. But I have been a privileged individual, and despite my familiar privilege and the fact that I've never wanted for anything in a way that was like detrimental to my health, you know, when things got serious enough, I got the help that I needed. Maybe it's because of that privilege that I honor that privilege by speaking up about the shit that we don't want to speak up about. You don't want to talk about it? Don't fucking talk about it. But don't act like it doesn't exist. Pretending it doesn't exist is not going to change anything. Pretending it doesn't exist is just going to make the elephant in the room get bigger until it sits on your ass and kills you. You're being suffocated by what's going on in the country today? Really think about the things that you allow to pass. Because essentially, continuing to pay into these systems is what's harming our economy. The sicker the American people get, the more it costs the American people. Universal health care could prevent that. It could prevent that, because then keeping us sick wouldn't be profitable. As long as keeping people sick is profitable, as long as over medicating individuals is profitable, as long as under medicating some populations of individuals is profitable, they're going to continue to harm the American people. There's no incentive to giving your entire life to a nation because at this point our nation is about corporate as possible, to a corporation that's going to kill you. It's killing you. It's really actually killing us. So really think about that, because the food that they offer in schools in other countries compared to the crap that they offer here, the free lunches and shit like that, it's crap. Some of the shit that we used to eat was nasty. I've been volunteering in cafeterias since I was in elementary school, just so I could get extras of the veggies and the fruits, because the other food used to make me sick, especially sloppy joes. So really keep that in mind. What are they feeding your kids in the school, even if it's the free lunch? Because essentially that's your future. If that child is growing up in malnutrition their entire life, they're going to develop chronic disorders that this country will have to pay for in the future. You want to complain about the big boomers drawing on that money? Yes, they are a problem. They are a problem. The end stage capitalism is a problem. However, the disease that we are creating in our future generations, that is also a problem. And that is something that grocery stores can directly fix. Instead of having food waste, they could be donating that to schools ranging from elementary to college level schools. They could be doing that, offering healthier lunches for these children by giving it to those schools. There is no reason why free school lunches should depend on any governmental support, but it does. If it had communal support, it wouldn't have to depend on governmental support. And this is what I mean. We can't fix the big governmental problems. We really can't. But we can focus on fixing the things that we can fix. And that's one thing that farms can do. You can look into changing your farming tactics to be more modern and healthier for us. You can look into donating all of the food waste items or ugly fruit and vegetables to schools for children to learn to eat healthier lunches. You can do that. And the PTA could focus on getting mothers cooking in those kitchens so that kids have meals that aren't just bland. Those lunch ladies, they need help. They need help. And you could go and volunteer. That's what they do in Mexico. There, some parents, I don't know if it's a requirement or if it's something that they do naturally, but they'll make breakfast for the kids and so on and so forth. Starving children should never be an option. It should never be a fucking option. Leaving children without medical care should never be a fucking option. Never. Ignoring serious health conditions because they might get better should never be a option. Something to be considered. It should not. We're making our children sick, and we are creating the crises that we will all have to face in the future. You may not be disabled now, but you will be disabled one day. And if these systems are not corrected, you'll be fighting for these rights in a wheelchair or as an elderly person. And by then, you won't have anyone to blame but yourself, because right now is when it needs to be fixed. They shut down the government because they don't want to address this shit. This is our chance to take things back and mold them in a way that supports all communities. Because if you're just focused on these fucking rich communities getting proper education and proper food, look at what it's already done to our country. If you're only focused on white communities getting proper nutrition and so on and so forth, look at what it's done to this country. That belief that privilege somehow gives you the right to belittle or mistreat or diminish any other part of the population has led us to believe that we're somehow superior. We are not superior. Go to another country and you'll see there is no such thing. We're all the same. you may not want to believe it, because essentially seeing yourself in those impoverished people would make you hate yourself. But at one point, even Irish were treated like that. Even Asian people were slaves at one point. Even Native Americans were treated that way. And a lot of them act on privilege in a way that is disgusting. So really think about that. Really think about it. Because essentially, this is our opportunity to build the country and the democracy that we've always thought we had. This is our opportunity to actually have freedom and be great again. Not the way the white people think. And I don't like to be racist, but in a lot of this, there's way too much racism going on. And it's gross. It's gross. And we got to stop giving our power to these companies. Because essentially they're not thinking about it. If they actually cared about healthcare, they'd research, not only research, but they would also fund the various Native American remedies that exist. They would fund holistic care. They would fund it. And they would see that by funding it, there's also money in that. Because maintenance care is important. And people will pay into maintenance care if you offer it. The thing is, it's not offered. You directly want to give all your money to Big Pharma. Even as doctors, you're giving all your power to Big Pharma by only offering treatments that are approved by Big Pharma and your company's policies. You're handing your power away. And you're handing your education and intelligence away by not learning about these other methods of healing people. Because every healing modality has its place and a space to be in. Every single healing modality. And until all of you start working together, people are going to remain sick. Until you start offering low cost or even costless healing for individuals in impoverished areas, I don't see you actually caring about the betterment of the planet. I see you claiming to want that and then doing exactly what Big Pharma does, just with a different name and calling it spirituality. I'm just saying. I love you and have a good day. This was not medical advice. This is not political advice. This is not any sort of advice. This is just a seed for thought. I love you and have a beautiful day.